Help us hit our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support drives us to create even more wonderful stories. Thanks for being part of our journey. It started like any other Thursday morning. Ethan was working from home, his laptop open at the kitchen table, a half-drunk cup of coffee beside him, and the faint hum of the dishwasher in the background. His wife, Rachel, had left earlier than usual, dressed a bit more polished than normal for a heavy workload day. Ethan had barely registered it at the time. After all, she'd recently been promoted at her marketing agency, and late nights, important meetings, and client lunches had become the norm. Around 10:00 a.m. Ethan joined a Zoom call with a new client, an investor group based in Austin. The project was moving fast, and they needed last-minute revisions to a proposal. During the call, one of the senior partners mentioned needing to verify a few branding elements that had come from their design collaborator. It's that agency in Chicago, right? The one with the peacock logo? The client asked. Ethan raised an eyebrow. That was Rachel's company. Oh, that's actually the agency where my wife works. Ethan replied with a casual smile. I could probably drop by and grab the files directly. Save us all the email ping-pong. Everyone on the call laughed lightly, and the suggestion was agreed upon. The plan seemed harmless, efficient, even, but somewhere deep inside, a quiet discomfort stirred. Ethan tried to ignore it. By noon, the call had wrapped, and Ethan slipped into a clean shirt and blazer. As he headed downtown, he rehearsed how he'd surprise Rachel. Maybe they'd grab lunch together. She loved that Thai place just around the corner from her office. He could already picture her smile when she saw him. It had been a while since they'd had a spontaneous moment like that. The city traffic was merciful, and 20 minutes later, Ethan was pulling into the underground parking of Rachel's building. As he exited the elevator into the agency's sleek marble lobby, he felt a flutter of excitement. Maybe this surprise would spark something between them again. Their connection had dulled lately, but that was marriage, right? He approached the reception desk, greeted the front assistant with a polite nod, and signed in. The receptionist, a young woman named Maya who recognized him from the holiday party last year, smiled and said, "Hi, Mr. Carter. Rachel's in the back, but feel free to wait. Shouldn't be long." As Ethan turned toward the seating area, he caught sight of something through the frosted glass partition on the far end of the hallway. Rachel, her laugh floated through the air, light and high-pitched. She stood beside a tall man with a tight-fitted blazer and perfectly styled hair. He leaned in slightly, said something that made her grin wider, and she playfully tapped his arm. Something about the way she tilted her head, the way her fingers lingered a second too long against his sleeve. It sent a cold ripple down Ethan's spine. He couldn't hear their conversation, but he didn't need to. It was the body language, the proximity, the ease, the intimacy. Ethan sat down slowly in one of the modern leather chairs, his hands clasped tightly together. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just office banter. Still, the once light idea of a spontaneous lunch had soured into a pit in his stomach. As he waited, Ethan's mind began to wander, remembering the recent changes, the late nights, the canceled dinners, the emotional distance that had crept in like fog for the first time. He allowed a thought to enter that he had suppressed for weeks. What if she's hiding something? And as the door to the conference room opened and Rachel stepped out, startled to see him, her smile flickering, he knew, deep down, that something wasn't right. Rachel froze for a split second as she spotted Ethan in the lobby, her eyes widening in surprise before quickly morphing into a smile. Too quick, too forced, Ethan noticed the way her eyes didn't crinkle at the corners like they used to, how her body tensed instead of leaning into his presence. That smile, it didn't feel like it was meant for him. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she asked, walking toward him, her voice a touch higher than usual. He stood, brushing off imaginary lint from his blazer, trying to match her casual tone. "Had a client meeting downtown. Turns out they're working with your firm. Thought I'd drop by. Maybe take you to lunch." Rachel hesitated. It was barely perceptible, but enough. She glanced over her shoulder toward the glass room where the tall man was still standing, looking down at his phone, then nodded, "Sure, I could use a break." As they stepped into the elevator together, silence settled between them like an invisible wall. Normally they'd hold hands or joke about her building's painfully slow lift, but this time, they both stared at the floor numbers as they ticked down, pretending not to notice the tension. Once outside, Ethan gestured toward her favorite Thai restaurant. "Thought we could go to Blue Orchid. You still like their green curry, right?" Rachel nodded, eyes scanning the street. "Yeah, of course. I just haven't been there in a while." They ordered quickly and found a table by the window. Ethan watched her as she stirred her drink with the straw, her eyes flicking to her phone whenever it buzzed. Every time she turned it face down, every single time. "So, who was that guy back in the office?" Ethan asked casually, though the words came out a bit sharper than he intended. Rachel blinked. "The tall guy you were talking to. He seemed friendly." Her fingers tightened slightly around her glass. "Oh, that's Marcus, one of our creative leads. We've been working on a big pitch together. Super talented, kind of eccentric." Ethan nodded slowly, letting her answer hang in the air. "He seemed comfortable with you." Rachel chuckled, a little too quickly. "Well, we've been spending long hours on this campaign. I guess we've gotten used to each other." The silence returned. Ethan tried to focus on the food, but he couldn't ignore the tiny clues. Rachel glancing over his shoulder, her nervous laugh, the way she kept adjusting the napkin in her lap as if unsure where her hands belonged. It was like she was playing a role she no longer remembered how to perform. After lunch, as they stood near her building, Rachel looked up at him with an almost apologetic smile. "Thanks for the surprise. That was sweet. I've just been really swamped lately, you know?" "Yeah?" Ethan said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She let him, but didn't return the gesture. Her face felt cool, distant. He watched her walk away, heels clicking against the sidewalk, disappearing into the revolving door. The pit in his stomach returned, heavier this time. Ethan didn't have proof. He didn't have facts, but he knew something was happening. And for the first time in their 9-year marriage, Ethan didn't feel like her husband. He felt like a stranger watching from the outside. The following days passed like smoke through Ethan's fingers. He was there, but not really present. The casual conversations with Rachel turned into mechanical exchanges. "How was your day?" Felt more like a password than genuine interest. She always answered too quickly, like she had rehearsed it on the train ride home. Ethan tried to tell himself he was overthinking, that after years of marriage, people just mellowed out. Maybe she really was just stressed about work. But the evidence, though soft and subtle, kept whispering to him. Late one evening, while Rachel was in the shower, Ethan walked past her home office and noticed her laptop screen glowing faintly through the crack of the door. Curiosity tugged at him like a persistent child. She was usually careful about logging off this time. She hadn't. He hesitated, then opened the door. The browser was open to her company's project portal, harmless, but one tab caught his eye. Shared drive, pitch deck, Marcus and Rachel. He clicked. Inside were dozens of files. Most were typical campaign materials, but one folder, labeled Offsite, was different. It held photos, some group shots at what looked like a cabin in the woods, others from late-night brainstorming sessions, candids of Marcus and Rachel laughing over drinks, leaning close, too close. One image made Ethan's breath hitch. Marcus with his arm loosely draped around Rachel's waist, her head tilted toward him, eyes closed. It wasn't a kiss, but it felt intimate, too comfortable. He quickly closed the laptop and stepped back as if it had burned him. His heart was pounding, and shame rose in his throat. He hadn't seen anything explicit, nothing that could prove an affair, but something inside him twisted uncomfortably. When Rachel stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in her robe, humming softly, Ethan was already in bed, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. She kissed his forehead lightly, a habit she'd kept even in the coldest weeks, and he forced himself to remain still. That night, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling, the faint sound of the heater clicking in the silence. Every laugh she shared on her phone, every late-night client dinner, every moment she smiled at her screen while texting. None of it felt innocent anymore. The walls of their marriage were still standing, but something behind them had already cracked, and the whispers were growing louder. The following Saturday morning, Ethan was sipping his second cup of coffee at the kitchen island while Ava colored at the table nearby. The soft rustle of markers on paper was the only sound in the house, offering a brief moment of calm, until the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Rachel had already left an hour ago. "Brunch with the girls," she said, blowing him a kiss on the way out. Ethan wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened the door. A young man in a navy blue hoodie and baseball cap stood on the porch, glancing around nervously. He didn't look like a delivery guy. Before Ethan could speak, the man cleared his throat and said, "Are you Ethan Walker?" "Yes?" Ethan replied slowly, instinctively stepping halfway into the doorway to shield Ava's view. The guy pulled something from his backpack, a manila envelope. "I work at Kilburn and Chase, the marketing firm." Ethan's blood ran cold. That was Rachel's workplace. "I know this is weird," the man continued. "I don't want to get involved in anything, but you seem like a decent guy. I've seen stuff that just didn't sit right. You should probably look at this." He handed Ethan the envelope, then quickly turned and jogged down the front walk before Ethan could ask a single question. Back inside, Ethan locked the door and turned toward the kitchen, hands trembling. He slid the envelope into the drawer and turned to Ava with a smile. "Want pancakes? Sweet pea? Chocolate chip ones?" she asked, eyes lighting up. "The best kind," he replied, masking the dread curling inside his chest. It wasn't until that evening, when Ava was asleep and the house was silent again, that Ethan retrieved the envelope. He took it into the garage, the only place Rachel never went. Inside were photos, not grainy phone shots or out-of-context images, but crystal-clear pictures. Rachel and Marcus in a dimly lit restaurant, leaning over wine glasses, laughing like they were the only two people in the world. Another showed them outside a building at night, his hand resting low on her back, her fingers grazing his arm, and then the one that knocked the breath from his lungs, a photo of them entering a hotel. Together, Ethan stared at it for a long time, unmoving. The walls didn't whisper anymore. Now they screamed. Ethan sat alone in the garage for what felt like hours, staring at the photos until the edges curled in his hands. His fingers trembled, not from the cold but from the sheer weight of betrayal pressing against his chest like a vice. Every fiber of his being wanted to scream, to confront, to break something. But Ava was asleep, and rage wouldn't fix anything. Not yet. He placed the photos back in the envelope with mechanical precision, each movement deliberate, like he was afraid any sudden motion would shatter him completely. His mind cycled between disbelief and crushing clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't just work drinks or an innocent mistake. Rachel was cheating, and worse. She didn't even try to hide it. He walked back inside on autopilot. The hallway light flickered softly above him, casting shadows on the wall that felt too still. He peeked into Ava's room. She was curled up with her stuffed unicorn, snoring gently, unaware that her world was quietly cracking beneath her. Ethan collapsed onto the couch and opened his phone. He scrolled back through months of text messages from Rachel, looking for signs he missed. So many working late messages, client dinners, and last-minute presentations, lies, all of them. And now that he saw the truth, it was impossible to unsee. But the scariest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the hollow space where love used to live. He didn't feel anger the way he thought he would, not yet. Instead, it was a numbing cold, like the moment before frostbite, when you're too frozen to even register pain. Sunday morning came, and Rachel returned home with a coffee in hand and the same cheerful, "Hey babe," she always used. She kissed him on the cheek without noticing his tension, then walked into the kitchen to unpack pastries. He watched her, watched how easily she played her role, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just set fire to their marriage and walked away from the flames without a scratch. "Rachel," he said quietly, but she didn't hear him over the sound of cabinets closing. "Ratch," he repeated, louder. She turned, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Yeah." There was a pause. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, the words ready to launch. the envelope burning a hole in his pocket. But he couldn't do it. Not yet. Instead, he forced a smile. Never mind. And with that, he turned away, because even though he had seen the truth, he wasn't ready to destroy the illusion, not until he knew exactly how far the betrayal went, and how much of his life he was willing to let her take with her. Days turned into a blur of routine, but Ethan was no longer living inside it. He was observing, collecting, waiting. Every smile Rachel gave him now felt like theater. Every kiss on the cheek burned like acid. And still, she didn't know he knew. He started noticing the smallest things. The way her phone was always face down, even when it buzzed. How she now double-checked the bathroom lock when showering. And the new perfume. Not one he bought. Not one she ever wore before, vanilla with a sharp citrus finish, cheap, artificial. Not like her usual scent. At work, Ethan kept his head low, but his mind was racing. He began compiling a quiet list. Rachel's late arrivals, her vague excuses, the business trips that didn't align with anything her company posted on LinkedIn. He even called her office once, pretending to be someone else. When the receptionist said, "Rachel's out with a client," he asked, "Is it Marcus again?" The silence that followed told him more than words ever could. That name, Marcus. It came up only once before. Ethan remembered it now, buried in a conversation months ago, when Rachel mentioned her team's new creative director. She'd smiled when she said his name, and Ethan remembered how she laughed too hard at a joke he never heard. At the time, he thought nothing of it. Now it clicked into place like puzzle pieces sliding into a brutal truth. That night, Rachel was unusually affectionate. She cooked his favorite pasta, poured him a glass of red wine without asking, and even suggested watching their old wedding video. Something they hadn't done in years. Ethan played along, his stomach twisting with every fake smile she gave him. When she fell asleep on the couch, curled beside him with her head on his chest, Ethan stared at the paused screen of their wedding vows. He barely heard her quiet breaths, only the roaring silence in his mind. He whispered to himself, "How long have you been gone, Rachel? Because the woman lying next to me isn't the one I married." Still, he said nothing, but something inside him had shifted. He wasn't just wounded anymore. He was preparing. For what exactly, he didn't yet know. But the lies had a shape now, and Ethan was ready to follow their trail, all the way to the end. The following week, Ethan decided to take a detour from work. He used a personal day, told Rachel he had a team offsite. The same kind of excuse she often gave. That morning, he drove across town to her office building. He parked 2 blocks away and waited in a coffee shop where he could see the main entrance, nursing a black coffee that had long gone cold. At exactly 12:43 p.m. he saw her. Rachel exited the building, walking fast, her phone in one hand, purse in the other. Her hair was done differently, straighter, more deliberate, and she was wearing that perfume again. The one that smelled like something you'd spray on just for someone else. Not for your husband. She wasn't alone. A man followed close behind. Tall, slim, blue blazer, no tie. Marcus. Ethan's stomach dropped. The way they moved together, casually intimate, told him everything he needed. Rachel smiled at something Marcus said, then touched his arm, a soft, lingering gesture that said more than any kiss could. Ethan snapped a picture. Not to confront her. Not yet. But to remind himself he wasn't crazy. They entered a restaurant down the street. Ethan waited 15 minutes, then followed. He didn't go inside. Instead, he walked past the glass windows, just close enough to see them seated at a booth in the back corner. Their bodies leaned inward, heads close, hands occasionally brushing. His hand clenched around his phone until his knuckles turned white. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theater. She wasn't even trying to hide it. He walked back to his car, drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before pulling over into a quiet park. There, he sat in silence, watching the wind move through the trees. His thoughts were loud. Too loud. Rage, pain, shame. 1,000 emotions colliding in a storm he could barely name. But at the center of that storm, a new thought whispered through. If she thinks I'm blind, maybe it's time I act like I am. Just long enough to open a door she doesn't see coming. Ethan didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. He didn't want to scream or shatter glass or expose her. He wanted something colder, more precise. He wanted clarity, strategy, justice. He pulled out his phone and opened a new folder, titled it Rachel Truth. The first photo, her hand on Marcus's arm. He stared at it, then smiled bitterly. The game had started, but the rules were his now. The days following Ethan's discovery passed like a strange, silent fog. Rachel seemed lighter at home, more relaxed, even flirty, as if her secrets were a weight finally off her shoulders. But to Ethan, every smile she gave felt like a needle in his skin. He didn't confront her. Not yet. He needed more. Instead, he became a ghost in his own house, moving quietly, observing everything. The way she kept her phone face down, how she stepped out on the balcony for calls with clients, and how she smiled a little too hard after reading certain texts. She started going in early to work, staying late, but always with plausible excuses. Q4 is brutal, or Marcus asked me to help on the new pitch. Ethan played along. He kissed her on the cheek in the mornings, packed lunches for Ellie, and maintained a steady rhythm with work. Though his mind was elsewhere, he couldn't afford mistakes. Not with what he was planning. Each night, when Rachel thought he was asleep, he lay awake, building the archive. Times, messages, route patterns. He installed a discreet GPS tracker under her car and a camera in the corner of the garage. If she left the house, Ethan would know, down to the minute. He also reached out to an old college friend, Liam, who worked in cybersecurity. No questions asked. Liam helped him recover deleted text threads from their shared iCloud backup. That's when Ethan saw it in black and white. Marcus, last night was intense. You're dangerous. Ratch Rachel. You bring it out of me. Can't stop thinking about your hands. Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional, passionate. Something she hadn't shown him in years. Rage tried to surge, but he swallowed it. He didn't want it clouding what came next. That Friday, Ethan took Ellie to her piano lesson. On the way back, she asked from the back seat, "Daddy, why does Mommy always work so much now? Does she not like being home?" His hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Mommy has a big project right now, sweetie," he said softly. "But I like being home. Don't you?" Ellie nodded, then looked out the window. Ethan dropped her off at his mother's house for the weekend. He said it was for a surprise for Rachel's upcoming birthday. That night, he cooked dinner, just like he used to. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, Rachel's favorite Chardonnay already opened. She came home late, nearly 9 p.m., and paused when she saw the setup. "What's all this?" Ethan smiled. "Just felt like having dinner with my wife." No reason. They ate quietly, her phone buzzing twice. Both times she ignored it after dinner. Ethan poured her another glass. They sat on the couch together, her head on his shoulder. It would have been easy to pretend. But Ethan wasn't pretending. He was recording every detail. Every lie she didn't say aloud. Every touch that didn't mean a thing anymore. His silence wasn't weakness. It was the calm before a precision strike. And Rachel had no idea the noose was already tightening. Rachel's shift in mood began subtly, like a glass beginning to hum before it shatters. It started with the way she looked at Ethan. Longer, more cautious glances, like she was searching for something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way he stopped asking where she was, or how he stopped reacting altogether. She noticed how clean the house was, too clean. The fridge stocked with her favorite snacks again. Her perfume bottle, refilled it felt. Staged, Rachel tried to brush the unease aside, but it crawled up her spine every time Ethan smiled too calmly or kissed her too sweetly. Something was off. At work, Marcus became distant. Their secret rendezvous slowed, then halted entirely. He began to avoid eye contact in meetings, and Rachel caught whispers. Murmurs from coworkers who'd been too quiet lately. Her boss, Melissa, pulled her aside one afternoon, her tone laced with concern. "You might want to be careful. Rachel, office rumors are spinning, and HR doesn't take kindly to complications." Rachel tried to laugh it off, but her stomach twisted that night. She asked Ethan if anyone had called her at home or stopped by. He looked up from his book with a serene expression and said, "No, why would they?" Her skin prickled. 2 days later, she found a note in her car windshield at the office parking lot. No signature, Just a single printed sentence on plain white paper. He knows. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She whipped around, scanning the lot, but no one was near. She crumpled the note with trembling fingers and stuffed it into her purse. That night, she barely touched her food and jumped at every sound. Ethan, meanwhile, watched quietly. Her fear was blooming. Exactly as he planned, he'd begun feeding breadcrumbs. Her search history was filled with keywords like how to tell if someone is spying on you and private investigator laws in California. She changed her phone passcode, then changed it again. Ethan smiled when she did. He already had a full backup of her messages and call logs. On Friday, Rachel arrived home early and noticed the safe in the garage was unlocked. Inside, it looked undisturbed. Nothing seemed missing. But she wasn't sure what was supposed to be there. That's when it hit her. She had no idea what Ethan had been doing for weeks. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distant. He was strategic, calculated, cold. And now, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man she had once known, the gentle, quiet husband who used to bring her coffee in bed, had turned into someone else, someone who had stopped loving her and started hunting her. The morning began deceptively calm. Ethan made pancakes for Ellie, their 8-year-old daughter, humming quietly in the kitchen. Rachel, dressed for work in a gray blouse and navy skirt, walked in, her eyes rimmed with the faintest trace of sleeplessness. She sipped coffee with trembling hands. "I have a late meeting today," she said casually, not meeting his gaze. Ethan smiled. "Sure. I'll pick up Ellie from dance." Rachel paused. "You remember her class?" "Of course," he said, his voice syrup smooth. "I never forget the important things." Something about the way he said it made her pause mid-sip. That afternoon, while Rachel sat in her meeting pretending to listen to quarterly projections, Ethan was sitting in a private room of a law firm across town, across from his attorney and a large stack of papers. In that stack was a full portfolio. Printouts of Rachel's text messages, timestamp security footage of her and Marcus at his apartment, office, even hotel rooms, photos, call logs, copies of office keycard entries. The entire case was tied neatly with a metaphorical bow. Ethan wasn't just preparing for divorce. He was preparing for extraction. He'd waited long enough. That evening, when Rachel got home, the house was silent, too silent. No sound of cartoons. No little feet running to greet her, no dinner simmering on the stove. Just a manila envelope sitting on the coffee table and Ethan in the armchair by the window. Ellie's favorite stuffed bunny clutched gently in his hand. "Where's Ellie?" Rachel's voice cracked. "She's safe," Ethan replied evenly. "Spending the night at my sister's." Rachel swallowed hard. "What's this?" "My gift to you," he said. "Everything you've done. Printed, preserved, and filed." She stepped forward and opened the envelope. Within seconds, color drained from her face. "This is... You've been spying on me?" "No," Ethan corrected. "I've been watching you. There's a difference. Spying implies secrecy. I always intended for you to know." Her hands shook as she flipped through the photos, her and Marcus in his car, the hallway kisses, the hotel keycards. At the bottom was a letter, a formal petition for divorce, citing adultery and requesting sole custody of Ellie. "You wouldn't." "I will," he interrupted, "and I'll win. I have proof. I've been the primary parent for 6 months. You barely noticed." Her knees buckled slightly, but she steadied herself against the couch. "Ethan, please." He stood, setting Ellie's bunny on the table. "Save it for court." Rachel reached out instinctively, but Ethan stepped back. "You threw this away, Rachel. Not just the marriage. Me, Ellie, everything. And now you get to live with that." The front door opened. Ethan's sister came in, holding Ellie by the hand. The little girl rushed to hug her mom. "Hi, Mommy." Rachel dropped to her knees, hugging Ellie tightly, tears spilling silently. Ethan crouched beside them and gently pried Ellie's arms free. "Time to go pack your things. Baby, you'll be staying with me for a while." Ellie nodded and ran to her room. Rachel looked up at him, a single, broken whisper escaping. "Please don't take her." Ethan's eyes were icy. You already did. He turned and walked out of the room without another word, leaving Rachel crumpled on the floor. A woman who had it all and lost everything,